Good to go. Okay. So since we're a small group, Pat and Aditya, if you ever have a question, just feel free to unmute yourself in the middle and like ask out loud. When I do the share screen, I often have a hard time looking at the Zoom chat. So feel free to just like chime in if you have any questions that come about. But want to start by just confirming that you all are in the right place, which is here to learn more information about our Civic Scholars Program. Yes. Okay. All right, great. There also was a session earlier that walked through 4 of the cohort-based programs in Gephardt Institute. If you had an interest in other ones, you could reference that at a different time. But for our time together, we're just going to be focusing on Civic Scholars. Show of hands. Have you heard of it before? Know of someone who's in it? Yes. Okay. So you've already got your own context and like own stories that you're bringing into this space, which is great. I'm going to cover some baseline information, and then we can make sure that we walk away with the same understanding of what next steps would be as you consider applying. So first off, just want to begin with Civic Scholars being a premier program in the Gephardt Institute. And this is a little bit of information about sort of the vision and mission of the Gephardt Institute. So this will show up in Civic Scholars programs, but this type of learning would also show up in the other programs that we do. I also realized I didn't introduce myself. Let me just pretend that we didn't transition right into it. I'm Stephanie. I use she, her pronouns. I work in residential life during the day, as I like to say. And then this year, I'm one of the co-instructors for the junior cohort, the 11th cohort of Civic Scholars, and will be the person kind of shepherding the application process for the class of 2024 and the interview process. So you would be hearing from me as you continue this journey. That's all about me. All right, back to the slide. So overview of Gephardt Institute. Our 3 main goals is 1, educating students for lifelong engaged citizenship. 2, catalyzing community partnerships that are responsive to local community needs. And 3, infusing civic engagement throughout the WashU experience. We'll get into this, but I am assuming since you all have some introductory context, knowing that Civic Scholars is a 2-year experience is a really incredible opportunity to infuse civic engagement throughout, at least half of your WashU experience. But really what goal I see showing up the most in Civic Scholars is that number 1, educating students for lifelong engaged citizenship. So while the program exists for 2 years and has a lot of structural support, we really hope that it's just the introduction to continued and lifelong learning and your own civic identity and civic leadership. The founder of the Gephardt Institute is former Congressman Dick Gephardt. He served in Congress from 1976 to 2004 and was really foundational in building the Gephardt Institute and its growth and expansion and its integration to the university mission. My Zoom boxes or my face boxes are covering it up to read it out loud, but really his hope is that, the presence of our citizens engaged in governance in the communities they live in is at the core of what civic engagement is all about and the core function of democracy. So that shows up in a lot of the curriculum and in the ways in which we engage with concepts of civic and community engagement. So some background on Civic Scholars Program. The first Civic Scholars Program started in 2012 with the graduating class of 2013. The class that we're recruiting for right now would be the 12th cohort, which is really exciting. Again, I think because it's like a 2-year cohort program that's very immersive, the community that is formed often extends far beyond graduation with a very engaged alumni network. And so there is actually supposed to be, one of the many impacts of COVID-19, where there's supposed to be a 10-year anniversary where alum would come back. And so we're still waiting to do that, but a really active and engaged group of alumni of Civic Scholars since 2013 to now. Students are recruited from all schools across campus, but really the core is that they have a common interest in civic engagement. Doesn't mean that we have an identical definition or perspective on civic engagement, but that is like our common curiosity and what brings the time that we spend together at the focus. But would love to have representation from students from Sam Fox to engineering to art sci, Olin, just across the board. That is a goal, of ours as well. So again, just wanting to underscore that there is no prescribed, perspective on civic and community engagement that this program or the Gephardt Institute is really asking people to apply and walk away with. Really, all of our programs are about introducing frameworks around civic and community engagement, bringing your voice, your experiences, your perspectives into it, and then we sort of co-construct and co-create what civic engagement looks like together, because often how we experience it or define it looks just a little different from the person next to us. So these are some, this Wordle on the screen represents some people's answers to this question. But, really how we view civic engagement is about promoting the quality of life in a community, both through political and non-political processes. But it's really about the promotion of a high quality of life in the communities that we are a part, or communities that we know of. So that is at the core of how we engage with the concept of civic engagement. So some faces on the screen, obviously one of them is myself, but so my other co-instructor is Dwayne T. James, who is an incredible dynamic civic leader, and he also is the instructor for the senior cohort as well. And then we have a few staff positions that are being filled that are typically part of the infrastructure and support for Civic Scholars. So there's an associate director for civic engagement, who serves as the key instructor for both cohorts, and then a coordinator for civic engagement programs that is really actively involved in a lot of the more ongoing programs that we do, which I'll talk about in a second. So like outside of class sessions. So program components, we'll start here. Before I go into it, I just like to offer that going back to like what attracts people to this program. I think students that would be a really good fit for Civic Scholars are those who are just really hungry for self-growth and have a curiosity for creating change, maybe have big ideas of how that can happen, or maybe have no ideas of how that can happen, but they have sort of like a hunger inside of like, I want to make a difference. I want to be an engaged citizen. And this program is going to provide the type of support that's going to allow people to experience deep growth and learning within those questions. So over 2 years, there's curricular aspects to how that learning will happen, and then co-curricular aspects, so things that happen outside of the classroom. So the academic course is spread over, so in total you would be experiencing 6 credit hours from your junior year to senior year. So a 2-credit course, both fall and spring of junior year, 1 credit course, fall and spring of your senior year. The class times are already set, so as you think ahead to potential class requirements you have for your major, these are the class times that would need to be worked around as you're considering other aspects of your schedule. So Thursdays from 3 to 5, and then your senior year, which I know seems like forever away, would be Tuesday mornings from 9 to 10. How the flow of the class really goes is that, in your application, you're going to be asked questions that don't need to have absolute answers, right? But that are a reflection of your interest and knowledge of civic and community engagement. Then that fall semester, we really spend time learning in foundational understandings of civic and community engagement, whether it's specific industries like governance, philanthropy, nonprofits, just getting a really broad understanding of those concepts. Then in spring semester, we really transition into the development of your civic summer, which I'll talk a little bit more in a second. And so that semester is really about almost writing your own grant proposal for the type of change you want to create and how you're going to create it. Then that summer between your junior and senior year, you experience your civic summer, and then you come back your senior year, and those 2 semesters are really spent around meaning making of your summer. What did I learn? What would I have done differently? How has this shaped me in my own civic identity and civic leadership? And and that learning happens together, we really find that the cohort experience is a powerful tool for engaging in that type of reflection together. So in addition to the course, which we just talked about, there's other program elements. I think the picture's covering up text, which sometimes happens with the downloading of PowerPoint, so I apologize for that. But in that Civic Summer, you know, the mechanics of how it works are that Civic Scholars are given $5,000 award to contribute to their Civic Summer. So that can be used in many ways that we won't spend time talking about now, but that you are given resources to support the change that you want to create. Second thing on the list is that there are some more event-specific activities that scholars participate in and have presence at and sort of a responsibility to. So you would engage in public speaking in both your junior and senior year. Your junior year, there's an event called Idea Bounce, which might be a familiar event type to you, but you sort of pitch your idea for your Civic Summer, the type of change you want to create, the communities you care about. And then in your senior year, after all is said and done, you come back and you do a Pecha Kucha, which is like an abbreviated, or I should say a time-limited presentation where you use pictures to draw talking points about your Civic Summer and some of the ways in which of your learning and growth. Then we have some more like celebratory type festivities that really brings the cohorts together. We have all civic celebration, and upon commencement, we also have a senior toast for Civic Scholars as they graduate. To jumpstart the junior year, to make sure that we're really investing in that cohort experience, we do have an overnight retreat in the local area. So usually, you know, by a bus, about an hour away, we'll do an overnight retreat that's really about bonding and introducing what people are bringing into the cohort. And then I'm going to skip to the final bullet point, but then there are also some shared program requirements that happen between juniors and seniors, so together. So for fall breaks, and we call them spring break, but they're really like the few days before spring semester starts, so like winter break more or less. We do an immersion trip either in the local area or in DC. So in this past fall, we went to Kansas City over fall break with both juniors and seniors. And then we were supposed to go to DC this actually past like 2 weeks ago, but it was canceled. But that would be a trip that we would ideally kind of emulate moving forward as a fall trip and a spring trip that happens in January. So really a winter trip. But anyway, and then the second to last bullet point I want to talk about is, again, just like the many infrastructure and support that we offer to Civic Scholars to help them in both success in the classroom, but outside of the classroom with their Civic Summer. So there's a lot of opportunities to network with people that we know are going to maximize your civic interests, be able to connect you to the things that you want to do. And then we also do a lot of connection points to alumni and current scholars for mentorship opportunities. Some things to think about before applying. Due to the way in which the cohort program is structured, applicants would not be able to study abroad as part of their Civic Scholars Program. So the course requirement being an in-person requirement would prohibit studying abroad as an option. However, you can do your Civic Summer in an international location. So a Civic Scholar I was once really close to, she did her Civic Summer in Bolivia, where she did a lot of cross-cultural programming through a partner organization there. And then she also took language classes to learn the native language in Bolivia while she was there. So while you can't study abroad, if a community you're really invested in is international, that could be your host site for your Civic Summer. And then other things just to acknowledge and name is that Civic Scholars is a very significant commitment inside and outside the classroom. So I think that that is why we spend a lot of time talking through the requirements and all of the different program components, because it isn't just like a club or a student group. There's a lot more asked of your time. You know, even mentioning like the fall breaks, like that would be a change for probably your plans for the next 2 years. And with the course component, it isn't just free credits. It is a course that's graded. There's assignments and deadlines that, you know, as instructors, we are, supporting your success in that academic unit. And then there are those special events that we talked through that can often require public speaking or mentorship or meeting with potential donors of the program. Okay, to get into the nitty-gritty of how to apply. So you showed up to this session, you've gotten like a taste of what Civic Scholars is about, what your next 2 years would look like if you were a Civic Scholar. What are some next steps? So it would be completing the online application, which is due by midnight by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, February 20th. And it involves 2 things. I'm going to start from the bottom up. It would be first identifying a faculty or staff member at WashU that could serve as a recommender and sharing them the recommendation form. And we'll follow up via email with these details from your name on the sign-in sheet. That recommender is going to be asked to reflect on their relationship with you and provide some thoughts on how they think Civic Scholars would contribute to your success as a student. So think of who that person might be and send them this link far enough in advance because their recommendation form is due also by Sunday, February 20th. Then the probably thing that's going to take you the longest time, the at length pieces will be the online application, which will include attaching your resume. And I would start, thinking back to highlighting some of the things that would speak to your civic and community engagement and pulling them out on your resume. And then completion of some essay responses. There's some word limits that are on there. But those are the 2 things that will be a part of your online application process. So resume, essay responses, and then identifying a recommender to complete an online form. We do have some drop-in sessions the week prior to the application being due, which are virtual on Zoom, that if you had questions about essays or wanted to just get some additional support, they're scheduled on the 14th and 16th, which is a Monday and Wednesday from 4 to 6, and then Thursday from 5 to 7. We will also invite current scholars to participate in those, to offer, if it feels intimidating to ask in certain spaces, they would be there as a more peer level of support and guidance. And then thinking through what happens after I hit submit on Sunday, February 20th, all applications are reviewed by about a 6-person selection committee that's made up of faculty and staff from all academic units and all across campus. And then we notify and invite final applicants to a 25-minute virtual interview that'll be scheduled either Friday, March 4th or Saturday, March 5th between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Then from there, 17 students, current sophomores, that would be rising juniors, will be selected as Civic Scholars, and also 3 alternates would be notified right before spring break or prior to spring break on Friday, March 11th. So you would go into spring break knowing your application status. Ask a Civic Scholar. So with the transition of coming back with the semester starting, but we're not back on campus, I don't have a Civic Scholar signed up for this session, but I do on February 2nd. But I do have a link that I'll drop in the chat. Actually, I think I have it pulled up. That is a Pechakucha event from 2 cohorts ago. So if you haven't been to the Gephardt Institute's YouTube page, it has a lot of good videos from prior events that we've talked about in this info session, like the idea bounce and the Pechakucha, to give you an idea of what some current students or alumni have done for their civic summers. But that might be a question. I think there's a lot of pressure with that aspect of the program. Like you might think, I need to have it all figured out before going into this experience. And often most civic scholars would tell you that wasn't their experience, and they still, learned a lot and had a lot of fun and growth within the program. So I, don't want to minimize the students who really come in with a plan. They know exactly what they want to do, but there are a lot that just, have a genuine interest in civic and community engagement, have some narrowed passion areas that they really want to invest deeply in and want the Civic Scholars experience to be the path pathway to engage in that exploration. And that's fine. We do not expect you to come in having all of the questions answered. Okay. Yeah, so that is the end of my PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop sharing that so I can better see folks. And then what questions do you all have?
I had a really quick question about the class time. I was talking about the kind of the seminar with one of my friends, and she was a civic scholar beforehand, and she said that like with her cohort, like they kind of decided on like a seminar time date versus like in the presentation it looked like it was a bit preset. So I was wondering if we were able to decide it or if it was like, the policies changed since then.
Yeah, this is my first year as an instructor, so I only know it, starting 2021. But I think that the program has grown so much. So like back in 2011 when it first started, there was only 5 civic scholars, and now we're up to 17. You can imagine scheduling with 17 people going into a year where people are taking on a lot of extra roles, I think has just been a real barrier to finding an ideal time. And so the change of setting the time and asking people to prioritize it was a better move to just have everyone's expectations sort of be the same. I can give an example. So we in the junior class met fall, 3 to 5. One student came up with a conflict with their major going into spring. Like, I have this major requirement course. I don't know, I can't make Thursdays from 3 to 5 work. So we were like, okay, well, we can try. We probably sent out 6 versions of a doodle poll. The best we were able to find was 1 hour where 10 of the 16 scholars were free. And it was not, it wasn't great. So we ultimately partnered we learned that the class is actually being offered for multiple times. So she was operating off of a previous knowledge set about that class only being offered once every 2 years, and that had changed. So we're still Thursdays 3 to 5, all civic scholars are still in it, but the scheduling, I think, can be a really hard thing to navigate. So we will have the Thursdays from 3 to 5 as set.
Thank you.
I had also a quick question. I guess about the immersion experiences. I was wondering, like, are these experiences mainly designed to help civic scholars get to bond with each other a little bit more, or do they specifically go and meet specific people or have specific programming they engage in?
Yeah, I think it's like a both and, right? Like, I think, like, from my perspective, the cohort experience is one of the most powerful tools about civic scholars. I think it's why people graduate with such affection for the program, lifelong friends, all that. So I think that happens on a trip regardless. But the time is definitely structured and scheduled and programmed out. So when we went to Kansas City over fall break this past semester, we identified a few neighborhoods that were experiencing some interesting learning points around civic and community engagement. So we spent time partnering with different nonprofits. We went to a few museums. Then one day was sort of media focused. So we focused a lot on storytelling, and we met with Kansas City Public Radio. We met with an independent newspaper and heard from them about how they form community partnerships and sort of the ethics around storytelling about community members. And then the final day, we met with the mayor of Kansas City, who's a WashU alum, and some of his staff and some of their more governance focused lens, like a woman whose portfolio is about building small businesses in Kansas City and the work she does to support them. So, we met with the civic leaders in those cases. In DC, we would have done the same thing. So our plan for DC was actually both juniors and seniors signed up for a specific interest area like immigration, education, and then we each took on identifying nonprofits or community leaders that could engage in deeper learning. And then it was going to be more like small group throughout, both because of COVID and physical distancing, all that stuff. But that was our plan for DC. But then obviously I think bonding and fun stuff happens too. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Yeah, I guess I had one
Yeah.
more. I think you already like sort of touched on this largely, but I feel like one other question I had was like, what level of, I guess, narrowness does an applicant like, or is like, how is that kind of perceived early on versus like, you know, someone that might have a lot of different interests or, you know, separate different narrowed areas. But I feel like you mentioned that's what largely Civic Scholars is for too.
To like explore. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are so many examples of good applicants and good applications. I think that my advice would be to sort of speak from your heart. You know, I think like that's always what translates in an application. Because really, you know, going back to the commitment of the program, this will only be a fun and meaningful experience for someone who wants to invest the amount of time that it is a huge commitment. And so I think that there could be, you know, people out there that are like, oh, this would look good on my resume, or yeah, I'm kind of interested in civic engagement or whatever, you know, just sort of like I've done community service once and that sounds good. And I think that would just translate because it would feel, I think you would read it and know this is going to be a burdening experience versus something that's really going to give back. And so I feel like in the application, speaking to the type of growth you want to have, the interest, like where does your interest keep taking you, I think would be great to include. Again, it should be reflective of you, but you do not have to go in saying, I'm going to like cure cancer. That's a horrible example, right? But there does not need to be as narrow as one specific thing.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, if there are no other questions, but also if there are questions, here for it. So Linda, probably via a Gephardt Institute email address, is going to follow up with folks who are attending info sessions with links to more information, links to the application form, links to the recommender form, so that you have everything that you need. And then additionally, my contact information is listed on the website. So if you had one-off questions that maybe come to you, or I didn't really want to ask in a large group or whatever, by large group, I mean, this very intimate virtual gathering we have, but you know, you could email me or we could set up a quick call, whatever, and we can talk through those things too, because we want to make sure that you have everything you need to feel like you're set up for success going into it.